Welcome back to the R.M.Williams Outback podcast. Great to have you here. This is Terry Cowley. I'm the host of the podcast and also the senior associate editor of R.M.Williams Outback magazine. We're very grateful to Ram Trucks for sponsoring this podcast. Australian agtech is ushering in a new era for the way we farm. There are over 500 agritech companies now in Australia. Many people in the industry are reporting that this is a critical period when the potential of artificial intelligence is being realised as it is applied to masses of farm data being collected. Journalist Ken Eastwood has taken a deep dive into the surprising and exciting world of Australian agtech for issue 155 of Outback magazine. Hello, Ken.
G'day, Terry. It's good to be here again.
Thanks for being here, Ken. Perhaps if we can start with you telling myself and the listeners about your visit to Bungalla Farm at Tammin in the WA wheat belt, where some of the latest and greatest in agtech in operation was on show.
Yeah, well, it was a trip that I went over to Avocag, the big agritech conference that was held in Western Australia earlier this year. And as part of that trip, there was a few field trips out to various places. And Perth at the time happened to be going through this hideous heat wave, as did all of WA. So out we went to Tammin out in the wheat belt there, and it was 46 or 47 degrees that day. And we'd actually... we're meant to be seeing these robots in action, that sort of thing, but it was so hot that basically none of the agricultural machinery was allowed to operate because of the fire risk. So we stood around trying to get a little bit of shade from the shed and look at this amazing farm, Bungalla Farm, which is actually doing some quite incredible things, and they've been doing a fair bit with agtech. The swarm farm robots are actually not only just operating individually, but one of the latest things is their ability to, when they run out of fuel, they'll actually come back to the station themselves and actually fill up with diesel and then go back out and continue working. Like it's quite extraordinary to imagine these things in operation.
What do the swarm farm robots actually do?
They can do a whole bunch of things, so you can set them up to do different things. One of their main things at the moment is this very precise weeding. So they can target individual weeds and just place a chemical or a herbicide in order to get rid of individual weeds. So that's quite extraordinary.
So they have the potential to save a lot on chemicals.
Very much so. So farmers are talking about actually only using 5% of the chemicals that they usually would.
The farmers there, Brad and Kate Jones, are not just interested consumers of agtech, they've also become active investors.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing to think about investing in agtech. It's obviously a risky thing, and yet many people are finding it's not as risky as they thought it would be. So one of the venture capital companies that I chatted to, that they expected up to 40 to 50% of the startup companies they were sponsoring to fail, but actually only 16% have. The returns that people are talking about are potentially 400% over a 10-year period, and that's banking on some of these startups getting up and doing really, really well, and some of them not doing very well at all.
Even with that, there's been a bit of a tempering of investment in startups over the past couple of years.
Part of that was due to a massive decline sort of at the end of COVID. So worldwide, from $53 billion investment in agri-food tech in 2021 down to about $16 billion. So a huge reduction. And some people would say that that's actually been a positive thing, that actually the market was a bit overheated.
They're talking about now Australia not having an emerging ecosystem, but an established ecosystem in the agritech sphere.
Yeah, so we are not just beginning players in the market now, we are established players. And again, a lot of the people who I chatted to said, 6 years ago, you might have struggled to find 8 to 10 good-looking startup in agritech, and now you've got a choice of hundreds if you want to invest.
But this issue of needing more venture capital funding seems to be possibly the biggest issue facing most of them.
Yeah, pretty much everybody who I chatted to said in Australia that there just isn't the amount of money being put into agritech as there could be. So you look at even the investment in Australia in all startups by sector. Agriculture and agtech is only ninth, so getting about 170 million last year, whereas there was something like business software, for example, being the number one, getting $505 million in investment last year. So there's plenty of potential in Australia for more people to back agtech.
This Tenacious Ventures is interesting, specifically focusing on emerging agtech.
Yeah, so they set up specifically, as you said, to focus just on that. So many of the other venture capital companies will look at agtech as part of their overall portfolios, but they decided that they really wanted to focus on that sector of the market.
One young researcher has come up with a way to move Australian agtech forward. He is open sourcing his invention.
He's a great young fella to chat with too, and he's now working over in, where is it? Somewhere in the Netherlands, I think.
This is Guy Coleman you're talking about.
Yeah, he developed a weed platform called the Open Weed Locator.
Catchy title.
Well, its abbreviation is OWL, and the concept is to open source the information. So rather than protecting the IP and protecting it all and keeping it all to himself, he decided in many other industries people actually open source this stuff, which allows a lot of people to grab it, to play with it, to develop it, to make it better and better. And as a result, he claims that you can actually build one of his open source weeders, a robotic weeder, for about $400, which is extraordinary when you look at the cost of some of these other operations.
I don't think I'll try, Ken. Rainstick is another interesting innovation.
I really liked chatting to Daryl from Rainstick. So Rainstick is taking a really ancient principle and then applying modern technology to it. So from First Nations people through to many farmers today, that there's this idea that when lightning strikes, that crops bizarrely seem to grow much better. And even mushroom farmers in caves sort of find that this is the case. After lightning strikes, that everything seems to grow much better. So Daryl developed this idea of, well, what if we could somehow reenact that in the seed form, that we could put an electric current through the seed as if it had been struck by lightning, and let's see what happens. And they're finding that certainly the biomass is increasing incredibly, much greater biomass than otherwise would happen, which is quite extraordinary. That the final results of how much extra crop do you get are still coming in at the moment. So there's currently stuff out in the field at the moment. But in terms of taking an ancient principle and finding a modern way to apply it, it's a pretty cool little story.
And they don't really know why.
No, and I think that's part of the challenge, with how do you test something when you don't even really know, what you're testing.
Why it's happening. Interesting. So it seems that Orange in New South Wales is becoming a bit of a Silicon Valley of agritech in Australia, or agtech. And you spoke to Spark Labs Cultivate there.
So they are venture capitalists, and they decided with their agtech area that they are supporting to actually base out in Orange. They have a history in sort of agriculture out there, and developing a lot of startups out there, and I guess not only startups but now scale-ups. In terms of the developing agtech scene out there. And that's everything from people who are making new proteins to people who are developing massive farm machinery that can do things better and more efficiently.
I think one interesting point they made was that they put businesses in touch with farmers to ensure products being developed will be useful.
And that's the fear, I think, from many farmers in the industry, is that you've got all these scientific boffins out there designing things that actually have no real-world applications. And pretty much everybody who I try to focus on in this story, it's the reverse, that these are examples of agtech that are being designed for farmers by farmers, and therefore they have much, much better application. And I think when we look at agtech, and if you are wanting to invest in this area, it's like, well, well, is there actually a problem that is being solved here, or is it just somebody just developing something just because they felt like it? And I think in all the cases that I've outlined here, I think there actually is a real need and a case for each of these to be supported.
And David Finlay, the farmer, would be a good example of that.
Exactly right. So finding that problem with a lot of machinery breaking when they were tilling in very hard soil and sowing in very, very hard soil. So developing this idea of, well, if we put active sensors on the machinery as it's sowing, then it can determine how deep we need to put these seeds. So we don't have to grind the machinery into hard soil by going in too deep, but we can actually go, oh, actually in this 100-metre stretch, actually there's a bit more moisture, so we can go a bit less.
You mentioned Evoke Ag earlier, which you attended in Perth. The next one is coming up in 2025 in February in Brisbane. Seems like you had a lot of fun getting to know people in Startup Alley at Evoke Ag.
It was probably the best convention, Terry, that I think I've been to of its kind. It's really, really well run. If anyone's got a chance to get to Brisbane next year, I think you will find so much there that is interesting and exciting, and so many people doing interesting things. And Startup Alley was fantastic because it's all these brand new businesses that have these amazing ideas, and they are in that early stage. And then they also had Scale Up Alley this year, which was for businesses that have gone beyond that first stage of funding and actually are developing more capital, so moving up into a bigger area. But yeah, amazing things. Everything from guys who are making plastic out of seaweed to these women who have developed this astonishing wool classing hand tool that you basically point at the wool, or you can point at a sheep and it'll tell you what microfiber that particular wool is.
Danielle Morton of Zondii.
Yes, exactly. And she started off developing this wool technique by developing something for her. And I think this is a good example of where agtech could have gone into a sort of a bizarre direction, but it was actually brought back by the industry. So her own kids had a lot of problems with health, and she was really needing some very organic, non-chemical food. So she developed this sort of handheld system where you could hold your smartphone up to an apple, say, and it would tell you whether that apple has any chemicals on it. Like, quite extraordinary.
I love the way you say, she just developed this. It's a bit mind-boggling,
exactly,
isn't it?
and yet was seen to be black magic, because how can this possibly work? And it was using particular optics within the phone that aren't usually accessed. And then the industry actually said, well, actually, can we find a better use for this? Is it in the wool industry in order to help us class wool? And that's what the direction that she's taken it. And that other use still might be a thing down the track, but this is actually a way that the tech and her company has evolved to come up with something that's really useful and practical.
And you found Liam Kampshoff, who has developed a sensor that can quickly and efficiently detect mastitis in cows.
Exactly. He's a young New Zealand fella, and he was out in his farm and just developed this really simple thing that just basically plugs into the cups in the dairy, and it's pretty inexpensive and can actually tell which teat has the issue with mastitis.
Might have some human applications as well. And drone hand is another one you talked about?
Yeah, again, many uses for drones, and I think the emerging area of agtech with drone technology is something we're only just touching the surface of, and from remote cattle stations where instead of having to go and check the waters regularly, there are many ways of checking that the waters are actually happening, and the potential savings in cost and expense and time of doing that. But in this case, Drone Hand, he's developed a system where the drone will actually, you can select a paddock, it'll fly over the paddock, it'll count all your stock for you, check that they're all still there, and can actually check on their welfare. So can even tell, whether they're down and giving birth, or whether they're deceased, or potentially the latest thing he's got with sheep is working out whether they're fly blown or not.
Unreal, really is. This is just moving so fast, isn't it?
It is, and I get that many farmers, who have spoken to me about agtech say, yeah, but I want to get out in the paddock. I need to check on the stock, but you can still do all of that. But it gives you the choice In the case of Drone Hand, when I chatted to someone who'd been using it, it gives them the choice at the end of the day, do I really want to drive out to that paddock, or actually I've got 3 other things I need to do. Actually, I can send the drone out and I can get on with repairing the tractor or whatever else I need to do. So I think
it's a complementing tool.
Exactly, and a lot of this ag tech, it's about helping farmers become even more efficient. We are some of the most efficient farmers in the world, and it's helping them develop ways to become even more efficient.
I guess a case in point of that would be the Bannister Downs Dairy, which you also visited, a fully automated dairy.
I've wanted to get to Bannister Downs for a long time. There are quite a few automated dairies now in Australia, but it was one of the first and one of the biggest. Massive project over in Northcliffe, Western Australia. And so it was a pleasure to get there. It looks like a modern, funky museum, much more than a dairy. It's this beautiful building atop this rise. And the cows basically will milk themselves. They choose when they want to be milked. They can walk in at any stage. They can get a massage from the machinery if they feel like it. And the dairy will read which cow is coming in. It'll assign the precise amount of food and the precise type of food that particular cow needs. If they've been milked too recently, it'll actually open a gate and send them back so it won't milk them at that stage. And the cows learnt the system really, really quickly, but it was interesting chatting to Sue out at the dairy because she said it was the humans who took longer to get used to the system because they kept thinking, we've got to intervene here, but the cows actually worked it out pretty quickly.
So you're talking about Sue and Matt Daubney, who own Bannister Downs. I loved Sue's quote, "It's not people's choice to get up at 3:30 in the morning in the rain and the dark and the mud," and it turns out the cows didn't want to get up that early either.
That's right. So if you give cows the choice as to when they get milked, it's quite interesting. Most will get milked will choose to milk themselves between 6 in the morning and 10 at night, and they take a break in the middle of the day. So it's quite interesting. But my funniest story from there was where, so every 8 hours, the dairy automatically sends the cows to a fresh paddock, and it's got 24 paddocks on rotation. And the cows, the smartest cows, they sort of hang back in the shadows and they sort of watch the other cows go up. And when suddenly they're directed to a new paddock, the cows go, "Oh, great." And so like 30 will suddenly come up all at once because they go, "Oh, are the new paddocks open now?" So they've sort of worked out it's 4 o'clock.
Smart animals. And they've also got a bit of, I guess, education going where they've got members of the public coming in and seeing this in action.
That was very much part of the Daubney's plan when they built the dairy. They wanted an upstairs that could be an education facility so people can see that agriculture is good. When it's done well, agriculture is a really good thing. They've got a cafe up there. It's not necessarily operating all the time, but a really sensible idea to show people a state-of-the-art dairy.
Something else that sounded very clever as well, AgScent and their breath monitoring technology. Like this is amazing.
Absolutely revolutionary, and it was a pleasure to get out to farm at Carwoola, sort of near Canberra, and to see what I think could be an incredible revolution in veterinary practice in Australia. And it's basically using a cow's breath in order to diagnose various things. So you can diagnose everything from bovine respiratory disease through to whether or not a cow is pregnant and how pregnant it is from its breath. Quite extraordinary. And it was developed with NASA, so money is available. Evidently NASA, whenever they develop something for space, they have to have an application that will benefit Americans. And so NASA was prepared to work with AgScent on this in order to develop a product that, because you can imagine the cattle industry in the US is enormous. So if this is something that could benefit them, and so instead of having, every cow having to be preg tested with what can be a fairly invasive test, having a device that, the cattle's in the crush, you hold this device up near the cow's mouth for somewhere between 3 and 10 seconds at the moment, and it can tell you whether or not it's pregnant. It's extraordinary, and up to 90% accuracy at the moment. It's actually sort of come out of human use. So some of the tests that were coming out of towards the end of the COVID pandemic, ways of diagnosing things through human breath, it was developed sort of from those principles.
Okay. Obviously, another big issue in terms of cattle is methane production, and there's definitely a lot of work going on to mitigate that.
Very much so. A lot of people, of course, are looking at the seaweed, at Asparagopsis, and how it can be used, including there's now a company that is taking the seaweed and making a synthetic version of the bit of the seaweed that helps cattle reduce their methane is called bromoform, and there's a synthetic version that is being, I guess, produced a bit like many of our drugs, our human drugs that we use were originally from a plant, but instead of actually growing a lot to the plant, we make a synthetic version. So it's the same principle, developing that bromoform that would become useful in cattle feed. It could be used in licks. It could be introduced to a water source in order to help the cattle reduce their methane production. But a lot of the companies that I chatted to who are working on these sorts of solutions, they're not just looking at the methane, they're looking at, well, for this to be something that farmers want to take up, how can we, what's the carrot, I guess, that we can give farmers? And it's this idea that it'll actually increase your production as well. So some of these products are being shown to improve gut health of cattle, so therefore they're putting on weight faster, they're healthier, they're less susceptible to disease. So with those sort of gains in productivity, therefore the reduction in methane production almost becomes like a benefit. So that's the benefit that benefits the world, but it's actually going to benefit the farmer as well.
Makes sense. Loam Bio was another interesting one, producing tiny spores of a fungal strain that, when applied to crops, increases yield.
Yeah, and I was blown away. I was handed this small plastic bag of, it looks like almost a sawdust sort of thing, and in it are all these tiny microspores. And this little plastic bag was worth something like $50,000.
Gee, I hope you didn't drop it.
Because you just use a little bit across your paddock as you're sowing, and it massively increases the ability of those plants to take up carbon dioxide. So again, solving a world problem, but yet at the farmer level, it's actually going to increase productivity. And I think as we're trying to solve some of these world problems, I know some farmers are feeling like they're getting blamed for things, and they're getting blamed for climate issues and that sort of thing. But I think so many of these solutions that people are looking at, it's looking at, well, let's take the world problem, but also help farmers at their level. So how can we increase productivity while helping to solve that big problem? And that's why this was such an exciting thing to look at, Or you look at, when I went to GoTerra, maggot farming, and you go, turning Australia's food waste, 7.6 million tonnes of food waste every year, turning that into a product that is actually a protein that can be used in things like aquaculture or in poultry farming, but also into a fertilizer that can then be used. It's win-win-win, and so many of these solutions are great solutions. They just need the funding to be able to continue developing their product and bring it to market.
Yeah, these new proteins are interesting, aren't they? I think there was a figure in your story saying that 11% of proteins that humans will eat by 2035 will be made in those sorts of, using microbes and growing proteins and fats. And it all seems a little bit pie in the sky, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and I've got to say, when I'm standing beside a massive vat that's producing, a new protein that might be designed to taste like chicken, or it might be a vat that's producing a fat that will be added to a veggie burger to make the veggie burger palatable. I sort of think, this isn't my idea of food production. But when we consider the whole spectrum of what we need to do to continue to produce enough protein and enough food to feed the world, I think these things are part of the solution. They're not trying to replace agriculture by any stretch. And the people who say out at a Cauldron firm in Orange who are producing some of these new proteins, they're very direct when they're saying, we're not against agriculture, we're complementary to agriculture. It's a different thing. Again, it's not... I stand beside the vat and I think, like compared to being out in the bush, seeing a bunch of cows running around, it's very, very different. But I think, the emphasis, it's different. It's not the same. It's not trying to replace it.
You mentioned GoTerra and the founder of that, Olympia Yaga. She's become a real champion for agritech.
She has, and she's very outspoken. If you ever get a chance to see her speak, she's hilarious. She tells it like it is. And you should have her on the podcast, actually. She's great fun. And, she talks about how when she was looking at sustainable ways to farm, she was looking at poultry production, she was looking at sheep farming, and in fact she does run sheep herself. But then she found maggots. As she says, maggots in a bucket were a thing. Who knew?
Well, obviously she did. As she says, let alone maggots in a robotic bucket. My goodness.
Yes, so these basically they're shipping containers, and inside those shipping containers, these maggots grow up. They digest all this food waste, and the whole thing rotates around. And every 12 days, the maggots are big enough to be harvested. They're instantly killed, and surprisingly, believe it or not, they actually had to go into ethical ways of killing maggots. They've got to be killed instantly. I mean, you don't put a bolt gun through their head or anything, but instantly boiled and then dehydrated, and then that protein, as I said, becomes an incredible food for poultry farming and for aquaculture at the moment. And
she's saying that you could put any Australian ag tech company up against an American ag tech company and we'd be outfunded.
Yeah, outfunded something like 10 to 1. It's extraordinary. So again, America is very much on top of its ag tech solutions and supporting it much more. I mean, one of the problems is we don't generally have the capital in Australia that many other countries have. But the other problem is that ag tech just isn't, when many venture capitalists are looking for what they're going to invest in, they're not looking at ag tech, and the encouragement is, wow, we are actually some of the best in the world at a lot of this, and we actually need more funding for this.
Yeah, Olympia Young is saying we, meaning the agri-tech sector, I guess, are the least subsidised farming sector in the world.
That's right. You look at America, it gets farmers over there get a lot of extra cash that ours don't.
So that probably covers your article, Ken. Coming away from it, where did you sort of finish up with your whole? What's your sort of feeling about the future of Australian agritech after doing all this research?
I'm excited, particularly to be a journalist at this time and seeing that bringing on artificial intelligence and massive data and how all that's going to combine to see some of the gains that can be made, and each farm, I think, will continue to become more and more productive. Plus, we have an interesting shift, I think, in the agricultural community where some of the older generation of farmers who perhaps aren't as keen on technological advances and those sorts of things might be ready to move on and hand over to other people. And so therefore, we have very smart, very savvy, new, younger people, farmers coming to the fore who are very keen to use as much ag tech as they can. And so I think it's an exciting era to see what can happen next. And look, not every startup is going to work. There are ideas out there which might be good, but just it's the wrong timing, or they can't get it to work economically, or that sort of thing. But there's so much out there that I think is positive. It's definitely worth having a look at. So hopefully
they can just get the funding.
Exactly right.
Government or private, I guess, or both would be good. So well done. It's an incredibly extensive article, and I guess it's one of those topics you'd be wanting to check in on a regular basis because it's changing every day.
Exactly right, and I think that's part of the excitement.
Fantastic. You can read all about it. Ken's article in issue 155 of Outback magazine. Grab a coffee. I said that in the last episode. I said grab a coffee. You can grab a coffee, and you can also grab a copy. The two go very well together, don't they? And also your photography is really interesting as well. Lots of great photos that you've taken in the article, so you can have a look at those as well. Thanks so much for illuminating the subject with us today, Ken.
It's a pleasure, Terry. Anytime.
I'll talk to you again soon. And to you listening, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you in the next episode.